Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. My name is Andy Libson. I'm a teacher in Oakland and a socialist. And we are joined today by Kenny, who's also a socialist. And we are online at what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find the link to our blog in the episode notes. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode. Jot down our information wherever you found this episode. So first off, welcome, Kenny.
Hi.
Eduardo's not here today. He is going to be regularly here, but just couldn't make it for when we could record today. And what we're talking about today is kind of a continuation of our religion and spirituality discussion. And I called you, Kenny. What was it? This weekend, like Saturday or Sunday, and basically said, I think I want to talk about if the idea of whether or not Marxism is a religion, because we spent a lot of time discussing religion a week ago, and I found myself responding to things that Hema was saying about her Catholicism. She's Catholic, right?
Yeah.
And even, you know, what she was saying, and I was, and the mirror for me was not, obviously I'm an atheist, but many of the things I responded to, I thought about in terms of me being a Marxist. And it led me to kind of say, you know what, I think I've been feeling more and more that while in the past I would have said Marxism is not a religion, I'm feeling more and more that it seems to be like one. When I want to talk about that today. But you know, and you had some thoughts about it as well. So I'll see what you want to bring up about it as we get into this.
Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe some thoughts on the previous episode. I think, the two episodes are going to connect, I think, because there was a lot of good ideas, conversation. I enjoyed the conversation. I think I've had that conversation with different people before, and I share similar views to what was said. In terms of like what I see as the differences between spirituality, religion, institutionalized, institutions and stuff. And I myself, I've been an atheist. I used to label myself as an atheist, and now not so much. In the sense that I don't, adhere to the notions of God as it's preached in some organized religions. But I have identified myself as a spiritual being at times. Right now, I think I'm struggling with that. And I guess to me, spirituality is more of an individual thing. And because it's, it varies. But I guess when it comes to Marxism, Marxism is definitely not a spiritual thing. I would definitely say that right off the bat. And you asked me to think about this question, and it's led me to different poles, I guess, because right away I thought, yeah, it can be a religion. Marxism in different, just like anything else. We've talked about, identity politics, liberal politics, and I've clearly identified certain things that tell me that is a religion in itself. And I want to address that just because I think that Marxism is not that different. Any ideology can't become a sort of ecosystem of beliefs that manifest in a religious manner. And so, for example, like in San Francisco, where I experienced liberal politics, I noticed that people would speak and say the same things, like mantras, like almost like prayers that you go to Catholic church, which is what I recognize. And, these terms and things get thrown around. And it's even things that I notice in shows like Jimmy Dore or Kim Iverson, and other, I guess, popular shows like Garland Nixon, and things like um, the military industrial complex, or big pharma, or these things, or in San Francisco, which is more about identity politics. You talk about they them, the pronouns, the and so those, and I feel like a lot of times, just like Hema said in the last episode, there's a lot of people, not everyone, right? But there's a number of people who do say these things, and without fully analyzing what they might mean, or even challenging these ideas. And so, for me, again, it's easy. I I feel like that to me represents a sort of religious following of certain ideas, and so I guess if we're getting right into it, Marxism is no different to me. I've definitely heard people who just quote things, or repeat things, as if it's a Bible, or even have a reading of Marx that is sort of, predeterministic and full morality, in that I think uh, kind of deviates from what I think Marxism is, which is a method of understanding and analyzing capitalism. Because Marx, and again, Marx is not just Marx and Engels. Marx is a bunch of people that came after them that have added, right, in the different contexts. And but even then, I know there is, especially people in academia, who read this stuff and kind of regurgitate it without um, applied it properly. I think of, and I don't know. Let me pause there. Like, if you have any questions or
Yeah.
thoughts, I don't.
Well, I guess I think I'm going to a place that's a little different in this regard, because I'm not thinking about it in terms of other people's use of Marxism as a religion. I'm thinking of it in terms of me. I actually, I'm still thinking about this. So, and I'm sure Brian, if he's listening to this episode, is going to talk to me and be like, I disagree with you, because he doesn't think this way. And he will still do the thing that I'm pretty sure he'll still do the thing that I used to do, which is make a distinction between Marxism as a set of beliefs and religion as a set of beliefs, because Marxism is rooted in materialism and science, and religion is based on faith, something where you don't necessarily have to have proof, or it doesn't require proof. And that was one of the major distinctions. In fact, it's the calling card for what distinguishes Marx and Engels socialism from all the previous socialists, the Fourier and the Owens, people who thought of a new world but didn't have a scientific basis. And the scientific basis for Marx was societies change on the basis of the contending classes within them, and it's the conflict of those classes which is sort of the energy and the tension which makes that society move forward. And that conflict has to be either resolved progressively through a revolution that leads to a new society, or that society collapses. And that is the path laid out for any civilization. And that's how he said that unless there is a socialist revolution, unless this new class that has emerged, the working class, takes power and for itself and runs the world just for workers, then capitalism will destroy itself. And that was what, it's either barbarism or socialism kind of thing. And so that is rooted in looking at history and looking at things that you can see, touch, I guess you could say taste, materialism, see, touch, taste, hear, and smell. So I'm not talking about those Marxists who are idiots, who I'm just going to, who went for COVID. I'm talking about me now. Does Marxism operate as a religion for me? And I think it does. I think, and the reason I think that's the case, or the reason I'm leaning in that direction, is I think science has operated as a religion for me. I think that if I ask myself, what do I really know? What do I have proof of? It has always required a faith in an institution that has told me this, whether that be the government, or whether that be a socialist organization, whether that be somebody who wrote a book. I've had to put my faith in those individuals that they're telling me the truth, or that they found some sort of truth, or that there's not something about history that they might be distorting in some way, shape, or form. And I've seen time and time again, like in so much of even our relooking, and when I was in the ISO, so much of our, me and Brian and Adrian and AJ, I mean, and um, Roger and Rachel, when we left the ISO, these are comrades of mine. We had to do a whole relooking at a set of facts that were presented to us, and in doing that, we found other books that gave us other ways of looking at these things, and led us to have a new synthesis of, or a different synthesis of, what was going on with the Russian Revolution or Trotskyism. Was Trotskyism really that different than Stalinism? Or to the extent that it was it different enough to not make them both versions of reformism? I think they are not different enough. I think Trotskyism and Stalinism are a version of reformism ultimately, that in terms of the way they're practiced, and even the way that I think they're pitched by the Trotskyists and by Trotsky himself, things like transition program and stuff like that. So that's one feature of it. But then the other feature of it is not just like the lens by which the faith I need to have in some of these people and some of these things that have given me information, but just even the faith that I have to have in science to say that materialism is me. Like everything I know about even like materialism and evolution and the way that the scientific method, in many ways, is given to me by these same institutions. I, I, at some point, I'm linked to them in some level of faith. Yes, there's a practice going on, that there's a practice of a method that produces some predictability that says, oh yeah, okay, I think that I saw that, I think that I saw that. So that if you will, that materialism is, I predicted this on the basis of what I see in the world, and these set of ideas, these political ideas I have, and then I see an outcome that looks like it's going that particular way. But also, just like any person who's religious, you can see it. There's a way you see what you want to see, and that's why you need other people to be around who even have the very similar beliefs to kind of pull you out of that. So
That's
I
but
yeah.
that's the point where I
First of all, is what I'm saying making sense?
it is,
Okay.
but I think like this moment where you're saying is, that's the point where I question whether then it can, like of course there is some level of faith in it, but you come back to the evidence, right, the material reality, and that's why you have to talk to people, right? So you're not enclosed in that religion. This is why I bring up this whole repeating, regurgitating, and being surrounded by the same people. Like I have not been in that space that you have. I haven't been part of the ISO, an institution like that, and yet I still have fallen for some of these things that I'm talking about. That the following by faith and just by someone else, what someone else is telling me. But in the process of having conversations here and listening to people that have maybe nothing to do with Marxism, some of my ideas have been shaped to the point where, like, I also had to re-examine, right? Because when I was beginning in Marxism, I was adhering to the predeterministic reading of Marx, right? Oh, revolution is almost inevitable, but that's not the thing, And even this dynamic of the working class and the capitalist class, that's in question. I think we've talked about in terms of technology, right? And a long time ago, you brought up the process of automation, and how does that affect this dynamic? And so things are changing, and so like I don't even know if I will be, Marx will forever explain this dynamic, because things are changing that in ways that Marx couldn't even predict. Yeah. So that's why I question that, like to me, it's not a religion personally. In that sense, it cannot be a religion because I completely see it as a method. And I'm not purely Marxist because I also, for example, see the value of having an anarchist spirit. I call it, in the sense of questioning any sort of institution that even it comes from Marxists. That's our job, to keep a watchful eye, of any institution that arises in trying to change the world, right? Because then, if not, then we're falling into that religion of just blindly following what Hema was talking about, right? Or just following out of faith. In that, to me, is not the process of constructing a world that I want to construct.
Yeah, I mean, but I guess, if you will, I'm starting to become more at peace with the idea of how much of what I do is based on faith. Working class as an agent of change, is the revolutionary agent of change. Do I believe that in terms of proof, or does that exist in me, in my heart, more as a faith statement? I actually believe it's more a faith statement than proof. I hold on to that more. Capitalism is a system based that runs on the extraction of surplus value, and then we often call that profit from workers of one class, and that the capitalist extracts surplus value from workers. Do I take that as a proof or faith? In terms of my knowledge of economics, as much faith as proof. That's my understanding of that, and the way it rests in my heart. I'm animated as much by faith as I am by proof. I almost would say probably more. That's how it feels. And I don't. And this is something, again, where it comes back to spirit. I don't know about spirituality. I know about me, if you will, and I don't know about a soul, but I do know about me. Like, when I say I know about me, that's what I live my life feeling me. And I can say, and this is where I got back to why I didn't see a religion as not aligning, like as needing to, in many ways, coming together, intersecting with what she was. When I took issue with Hema when she separated religion and spirituality, and Eduardo did the same, and I think maybe you would do the same. I take issue with that because,
I think it depends. I don't think it always does. I think it's
well,
sometimes.
I'm just saying for me. I don't know. I can't speak for anyone else. I'm just saying, and I think we were talking about it. I'm not speaking for you or for Hema or for my brother. I I still haven't talked to him about it. I want to know what he thinks, because I was predicting that he would think that these things come together, even that they're separate spheres, but the goal is actually to integrate them, in my opinion. And because that's what I would say is, I am a believer in Marxism who is integrated that into their self. And it animates the way I am with my colleagues, the way I am in my counseling, the way I am with my wife, the way I am with people on the street. It doesn't decide it. I didn't read the Communist Manifesto and then go do this. But the spirit of the working class and collectivity, communism, commune, is it. That's a very, like, I'm drawn to that, like a moth to a flame. And I think a moth is a religious creature. It doesn't think about it. It goes towards the flame. And I don't think Marx turned me into that, although I do think reading Marxism drew and helped animate that part of me that feels very bound by this notion of collectivity and communism. And every time I think about truth, right? When I talk about truth, even, I don't think about individual truth. I think of a collective truth, right? But all of that is not something I can say, oh, I know this, or that has been proven. I can only say that it exists, it lives within me. And that seems to be why I keep doing this stuff, and why I get myself in trouble at work, and why I, do whatever I do. And maybe why, Hema thought I was going to be alone, because she knew I was committed to this, but I wasn't. I don't think I was committed to it just on the basis of the proof of the ideas. If I look back on it, although at that time I thought, I'm not practicing a religion. I'm doing something that is true. I'm doing something scientific. Now I believe that I walk through this world in faith, like dealing with various aspects of faith, even to the point of like, the Higgs boson, right? I mean, I understand it's a small thing, but the Standard Model, it's fake. Like, and the and I get it that these are just different. Like, the real thing should have been in science that there have been competing ideas, that there's a different ideas about uh, how even particle physics could have been addressed, or should it be addressed. And there were competing ideas about the universe and whether the Big Bang had happened. And one could say that we were supposed to have existed in a stew of doubt, where different ideas just kind of existed and you just kind of plucked among them. But but I don't live in that world, and maybe that's a truer world, and I do believe that is a truer world, and I do believe a free society would be one in which doubt was much more common, and there wasn't all this thing of you're told this and told this and told this. But because I live in a world of being told this and this and this, I feel my agreement to it is faith, and sometimes my opposition to it is as much faith than it is proof. I do it because it takes me to a place that feels better for me, that makes my life more whole and integrated, and it feels truer inside of me. But can you tell me that's any different than what you've heard from a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew who talks about why they're practicing their God? I don't think that sounds any different. And so that's why I'm talking about it this way right now, because I don't think I'm saying something that fundamentally different than a person who says, I know Jesus exists because I feel it in my heart. Look, I actually believe in Marxism and the possibility of revolution and working class revolution. It's more in my heart than it is a proof. I'll just say that. And frankly, it's shaky. Like I'm a person who is wondering, like person who had, like Job, doubting God. Why are you fucking with me so much? Why do you I prayed to you. I did all the right things and you fucked me over. So I get how I'm often prepared to jettison this, jettison that, and relook at stuff. I still believe that the working class is the agent of revolutionary change. But I believe that, but fundamentally, I think I believe that more as a faith statement than as a proof. And yes, you can read things, you can see how class struggle exists, you can see how Marx talked about and saw workers in France and workers in England and workers in Germany as they started to emerge, and mostly workers in England, I guess, and saw them as a physical entity deal with the capitalist and their boss. And from that, he started to theorize about a new class emerging. And it wasn't just Marx who talked about societies being class divided, but there's a particular formulation he put to it in terms of, I guess, the possibility of revolutionary change coming from the working class itself. That might be something that's just Marx. I believe that is. But again, when I say that, it's an article of faith based on somebody else told me that, and I read that. And that doesn't, and one could say, well, then what the fuck are you doing? Well, I'm acting on my faith. That's what I'm doing. And that seems to be good enough for a Christian or for a Muslim or for a deist or for anything. And am I supposed to say to myself, oh, I'm doing something different than them? I question that today. That's what I'm going to say. Do you get what I'm saying?
I mean, it's interesting to hear that, to see that that's where you're at. Because, I mean, so, like, just going back to the last episode where you guys talked about, I think, like, institutions, religion and stuff. So personally, I have seen some, in my life, in the community that I was raised, where the government was out of the question, where, we ran our shit. Like, we actually fought the military, the police, our community wasn't the richest, the wealthiest, but we had a community, and we showed up for each other. And it wasn't perfect. And, and so to me, that's what sustains my idea that, people can rule themselves, that I've seen it myself. I've seen when my mother, when the Hurricane Mitch in the 90s came and destroyed, my mother went and got a pickup of shit and went into around. Instead of taking a 3 hour trip, she went 6 hours, to go in action, to show up for people, and then primarily for her family, but then she saw the need of other people, right? And then mutual aid and mutual help, sustain. I've seen it at least in the stories that I've heard in Puerto Rico, where the fucking everything collapsed and people were like, fuck the government, and they started running shit themselves. That to me is my evidence that people can run their societies and their world, right? And actually, like, a lot of these things are not even based on like theory, like Marxist theory. They just kind of spring up, but at the same time, also, I'm not just gonna pretend that these are just the good stories, because there is bad too. There's fucking predatory shit that happens in every situation, chaotic situation. But that to me is the evidence that that this system, they're supposed to provide and blah blah blah, it's not necessary, right, to run a society and a world. And so to me, that's a little bit of a difference. But I see what you're saying, because I do have to analyze the shit that I believe, because there are beliefs. I do think that's important to recognize what you're saying right now. That yes, in some things, because what is faith, right? Like it's like it's the lack of evidence, and yet you still have the hope, right? That this would happen, it can happen, and it will produce the outcome that you think you believe may happen.
Right.
So I see that, and I think it is important to bring it up. I do think I make a bit of a distinction with like Christianity and at least where I'm at right now, because I am a person that tries to rationalize in like you are too, obviously, but and I try to see it in my experiences, right? Like that's my evidence, and I try to put a little less weight on what someone else is telling me, or try to question that, because like again, I haven't experienced that. I only base it on what I've experienced. I've experienced it in my community organizing. As shitty and as fucking liberal as it was, I see those, that evidence that we can run things if we are more empowered. In again, but that I guess that does develop a level of faith, right? That this can be scaled up, right? That this can be done at a macro level, rather than just in our communities. And again, that's why when I talk about communism, right? Like me, my communist, I've said it before in the show. My communism is not like, I don't fucking know about the whole U.S. I don't fucking know about like the state of California. Right now, I'm on an island. I don't know where I'm at because I lost my community. But when I was in San Francisco, that was my fucking community. And the people who showed up and did action, and even the people who didn't want to go to war with the city government, right? Like, even they did good things, even though they don't have a full understanding of, the choices that were made. And so again, to me, that is my evidence. That does give me some faith. So, I still go back to what you're saying. So there is, a level of faith. I get it, but it's based on what I've experienced, and it's going to be continue to be shaped on what it will continue to experience, right? Because that's what we talk about, action, right? Action is what shapes us. I mean, just to bring up Cristal, we talked about it, and she gave me permission to talk about it. She did not start questioning her liberal ideas, or what it wasn't materially real. It wasn't real until she was attacked by the system of identity politics, when she was speaking up for the people she was, trying to show up for. When the people who preach the virtues of making the right choices, saying the right things, didn't show up in the way that she did. And so that is why I think I appreciate that comment that Hema made when she said that I do see there's people that can be religious and spiritual, but there's also people that can just be religious because religious to me is a a system that shapes and guides people's ideas of what is right or not right. But at times that is limiting, and this is where anarchism it has to be part of the equation too. Like you have to question any sort of power arrangement. Like we even question I even have to question my arrangement with my own family, with my mother. To me, like I've decided years ago that nothing is too sacred to not question. And that to me is the perils of treating something as a religion, right? Like where some things become uh, they're protected, right? Because to me that's how I understand that successful religions in the world have shaped have survived because they have a mechanism that protects against dissent. They have mechanisms that keep people in line, in order for the institution or the system to survive. And so again, like I'm rooted in my experience, as a kid, in not in a DSA or ISO or anything like that. I've had like a sort of suspicion around this kind of organizations, to be honest, because it sounds the same. It's very culty. That's why I was part of like Bible studies in college, and I was never a believer, but I went anyway because I wanted to understand and like read and see what they're trying to say. And I felt the spiritual part in the sense that people connected to this, and I felt it was genuine, and I respect that. I don't. That's people's form of existing in going through life, you know. But I just don't see the world the way they do. That is, I think it's clouded and it limits your view of the reality of other people's realities too.
Well, I think I'm glad you started with what you said with like the physical evidence, if you will, the physical evidence of what you saw in Guatemala, and those are things that if you read Marx, that those sorts of moments are explained by Marxism in terms of people acting in a revolutionary manner even before their minds have come to revolution, you know, um, and the idea that being goes before consciousness, and there's a and that the deed will come before the thought that produces the deed, meaning that you know well that's just it's this base superstructure stuff in Marx, um, and so I can sit there and go like, yeah, no, that acts as a kind of a physical world existing confirmation, and I do understand how many religions, maybe all religions, I'm not sure this is true. I can definitely say many of the religions we're talking about, the Christianity and Islam, I believe is true. Well, I'll just talk about Christianity. I think say that they're not trying to make sense of this world. They're speaking of another one, and in that regard, um, they maybe there's a difference there, maybe, maybe because, and they're not. But I don't know. I don't know if they don't use any sort of physical evidence, because you know, I'm not willing to concede that that's necessarily true. I'd have to talk to somebody who is more rooted in that belief system. Um, but I still know that I guess I'll just say I cherry pick. Right, that's where faith operates. Faith says I'm going to use those sets of experiences or those sets of things I've heard about or seen to really be my North Star, and I'm going to dismiss all these other things and say, no, that's not, that might have been a reason to not believe, but I'll push that aside. I think there so much of I think so much of me doing that is animated by a faith, that decision to push aside one set of facts and to highlight another is, I feel it does feel rooted in just who I am, because the center of it does not feel like I guess I don't go back to a book to go find a center. I do it by checking myself, and maybe that's a problem. And I do believe that, well, I have believed in the past that theory and practice are going to have to be connected. The idea of the way you think the world is constructed is going to have to be connected to what do you think, what kind of world are you kind of trying to construct, or like actively trying to do. Those things are going to have to be synthesized. And maybe that's also why that I think spirit and religion are not something you try to separate, because the praxis, theory and practice, to me is ideology meeting action, and it's where the being becomes infused with the ideas that empower them to change the world. But it's not a set of ideas that make you do it. It is in Marxism. It is literally people, and it is masses of people that empower us to create a new world. There are no set of ideas that make that happen. It is bound by if this idea of a physically existing collective group we call the working class. But I'm just repeating, in my opinion, I'm repeating some form of Marxism. The question I'm having is, as I say it, am I saying something that I know for a fact, or am I repeating lines from a religious text? And there's definitely feels like an element of religious text in it to me. And low class struggle, we even tried to do a thing at our work, and it's kind of not quite coming together. I have a long history of not doing anything with my coworkers in response to the bad shit that's happening. And so maybe that experience is what puts a person like me in a place where I'm like, the only way that my understanding of even class struggle at this point is bound up at some level in faith. But that's where I am, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. And when I say that's where I am, I used to talk about materialism as if it meant something that solidified something. Like now it allows it to exist, and really we know it exists and it's solid. And that was rooted in the idea that science was sound and had something to offer in terms of truth. And in a society whose institutions are based on using lies to control you, certainly not this science, and not the science I was raised with, and that science I was raised with has a scientific method in it, and then there's all that quantum mechanical crap of like things changing when they're observed and they become something else, or they exist in a waveform, and once they're observed, then they materialize into a particle at that point. That kind of crap. Again, but do I know that? These are science things we hear about. Another from another set of priests telling us about this invisible world that I can't say I know that that's the. All I can say is that this is shit that these institutions tell me and they train me on, and I've treated as fact. So at one level, just one level, somebody could say, well, then how are you going to do anything? And I have to come back to me. And I go, I can do anything because I have to come back to me. And what do I feel? What's going on inside of me that's making me move? And I don't feel right. I do feel like this world is a world of control and is one bound for an end, like a bad end, like World War III kind of thing. And I do feel like the only thing that's worth doing in life, if I'm going to be animated in my own life, is to do something to try to oppose that and find another way. And I do feel like that's the only possibility of doing that is if I find others who feel the same way, and we start to try to do that and hope that others are doing that elsewhere throughout the world. But my answer becomes resolved down in my heart, not in my head. That's what I would say. And I don't think there's any. I think if we talk to James, the person we talked to, the Catholic guy, I think that's how he would talk. I think that's how my brother would talk. I think that's how any religious person would talk. I know in my heart. So I go home. Here I am.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking of what you were saying, about the preachers and science, and um, to me, like, obviously we're interrogating science, right? And um, you know, obviously there is still good in it. You know what I mean? Like, that's the other problem, right? Like that we think that because something is tainted, and that's that's a kind of a religious thing. That's how I see it. To do these, or if it's not pure, then we don't touch it, type of thing. But like I still believe there are parts in science. I just have to be way more watchful in work at trying to understand how deep the lies go, right? But in because we know that we live in a world that they take uh truths to sell us lies. In like it's not all like like COVID for me, for example. Like, I saw my bro get sick with something weird. That's why I don't adhere with this idea that there was nothing. Because I saw my brother get sick with something sick that he never has before, in a period with other people were going through similar shit. And it took him a long time for his taste buds. And yes, I get it. We've heard that the flu and all this shit. But I saw my brother get sick with shit. I saw other family members. There was something out there, and it was a little stronger than the flu. It might not be the flu, enhanced, but that was my evidence. Like, that's what told me, like, no, I'm not just gonna say like, no, there is, because that is also right, like a sort of faith, making these statements where we don't have the evidence to. Right. And to me, it was seeing my brother going through the process of um, dealing with the state and the fucking lies that they keep telling us, and they were throwing and then talking to my friend who works in medicine. That's what gave me the evidence to be like, these are fuckers are lying. And so that's at least the initial part, right? Like, uh, and but I guess my point is that my obligation as an individual, and that's how I try to live my life, I guess, is to experience something before I believe it. And that's probably because I haven't, because I don't think Marxism has all the fucking answers. I think it has a pretty good description of capitalism. It talks about capitalism in the way I see it play out. And so that's my evidence. But if you call that faith, then I guess it's faith. I don't know. Like, that's you know. But and in terms of the future, I'm not so optimistic. Like I understand these tensions, right? That's what Marxism argues, that the working class is the revolutionary class potentially, right? It's not the fact. It's not like, again, determined that it will happen and it will contend against the capitalist class. And we're trying to move it. I don't even know if it's fucking possible, to fight against this fucking system. We have to fucking fight anyway and resist. And I guess there lies some faith that maybe, hopefully, we'll fucking fight back, or people will wake up and say, fuck this. So I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. I guess what I'm saying is it's a combination of both. You have to come from your own reality. That's why I call myself a materialist, right? And and that's why I've come to the point where, like, I don't fucking know if it's possible. I have to try, because as a person who sees a world of oppressors, you do have to have faith that you can fucking shake them off. Yeah. Otherwise, you fucking shoot yourself. And I'm sorry, like,
right, or just don't do anything. Like, just live some other kind of life. And I guess when you just say that, Kenny, that what you said at the end there, when you said at the end of the day, you do have to fall back on that faith. That is that's the situation I feel like I'm in. And I agree with you that there is physical evidence. but I have to, right now I'm in a place of questioning, and even the notion that it's like the Rorschach test. You see a picture and you can look at it and be like, look, there's a butterfly there, and somebody else sees something else. You know, physical evidence is very subject to what you want to see. You know, um, but nevertheless, I do think there's something to that process. Like I still do that. And I'm not going to stop doing that. It would be very strange for me to be talking on the show and not saying, well, that happened in the world, until I'm going to say this. I'm going to continue to do that. Um, I am an atheist by default. I don't believe in a God, but my God seems to be what? Class struggle, some sort of notion of revolution, and I'm following that, and that feels right to me. That aligns with me. Um, but I guess also I think it's been meaningful to watch my brother's transformation and him become more of a communist through Christ. Like to see him go that way, to come to a place of really seeing people as 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 the same as him through that lens. And I go, and that has caused me to. Well, I think there's lots of things. I think mostly it's the fact that I had certain expectations and certain beliefs about science under capitalism that was wrong, and
Mhm.
I think having that shaken has caused me to really question, what do I know and what do I not know, and what how much do I really take as just faith. One second. So I think I'm repeating myself there, but I don't know. I know I'm struggling, in terms of to articulate it, but I wanted to talk about this because um, it's something I've been thinking about.
I mean, like you're an atheist, it doesn't mean you don't have a belief system, right? Like we
Right.
all have. I mean, that's part of being human. You just don't. Otherwise, we'd be robots. I think.
Correct. And a belief system, but I think I used to think of my belief system as founded on fact and physical evidence. I think it's got a whole lot of it's marbled with lots of things that I don't know that are just in there on the basis of faith. And and so it has as much, if not more, of that than it does, quote, physical evidence in constructing it. And that's
Mm.
why I don't make I'm tending to think I'm not that different than these other people who do believe in a God.
Yeah, I mean, I
And
think
maybe that's fine. Maybe it's sure
I
why I find difference, but
yeah,
it's just I hadn't thought that way before.
I think that is, you know, that is important to have in, you know, in. I don't know if you still think of yourself as a revolutionary, but like I've said this before, right? Like being a revolutionary is an act of faith. Like there is that that I think it is. It's no different. Um, Again, but I think that is a very drastic, and to me that is very significant difference that you know existing in this world, right? Like in trying to shape this world versus, and I guess people have it in other in religions have it to different degrees, and um, because I understand, right, like the spirit of previous Marxist experiments of trying to eliminate religion, even though like I don't agree. Like you can't construct the world that I think I want by forcing people to do anything, right? Right, like and therefore it's super hard and nearly impossible. And I still believe it can be possible. um, and so, but I just don't think like I want to live in a world where Christians, Jews, you know, Muslims, Buddhists, and anyone, wants can practice their, whatever the hell they want, and they can coexist. Uh, but the belief system that's dominant, there has to be, like we it has to be, or at least the agreement that rules this earth has to be one where we are allowed to do that without being forced to, right? And and much of it is determined right through how we relate to material reality. That is the belief or idea that that, right, it's at the core of Marxism. Um, and so again, what I'm saying is that I don't think like those other things can be the dominant thing, and like that's why I understand why previous Marxists try to do away with it. But that was the wrong approach. That's not, and also it's very top down, right? Like we haven't had a way of like bottom up where people like Jews and Muslims come together and Christians and they work together and to see their commonality. Maybe in small experiments that we don't even know about, but I don't think those um, other institutions, I guess, or forms of organization can, dominate, or because we see what happens. We see what happens, and so then the the ideas have to be rooted on the here and now, and that's the hard part. And what we can't touch, what we can't shape, what we can do for each other, like Eduardo said, in the previous episode. And that's why I think I think that difference to me is astronomical. It's not a small difference, and that's why I think like I won't compare your belief system to that as much, even though I do think there is faith. There is faith. Like in I don't think it's a bad thing to say faith, because I do think like in our modernist, scientific minded propaganda heads, we have come to this notion that having faith is a bad thing, or having, or we equate faith to religion. We equate faith to ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
And but at the end of the day, like, and maybe this is what I call the spiritual side of it. You talk about what feels right. That to me is your spiritual side, because you
Yeah.
don't know exactly why. You can rationalize everything, but if it doesn't feel fucking right, don't do it. And no one should fucking force you to do it. That's what I call, the spirit, because shit that I don't know, but like you just feel it, right? Like you just know when you're threatened. You just know when someone loves you. You just know when someone cares. You know when someone is genuine, by and large, right? Like, and so to that, in the past, I said in the show that I do, when Alison was on the show, and she was questioning the whole materialist thing, right? Like, I do think there is an element of spirituality missing, right? Like, because we cannot just focus on the how do we make revolution without protecting the shit that you said it before, like building things that is worth protecting because they feel right? Like building community, building the cultural stuff, the artistic stuff, the caring stuff, the things that create bonds. Because otherwise, we are in this mechanistic thing. Like we're just trying to make revolution in a mechanistic way, and I think that's profoundly missing in a lot of this shit. In in I don't know, like yeah.
No, I mean, I resonate with a lot of what you're saying in terms of, well, certainly when I think about the end goal, if it's not people really truly being free to be however kind of human they want to be, and free individually and free collectively, I don't give a shit about it. Like, why would I want to fight for anything else? And in reading Marxism, in reading something like the Communist Manifesto, does it suggest a way to get there? It does. and but there's a lot. It's certainly not a manual. There's no and I don't know if it should pretend. And I think there's things in that Lenin has written that, like what is to be done, that begins to provide the closer things to what people have called manuals. Um, I have to go back and think about what do I agree with from that, what do I disagree from that. I'd have to think about that for a while. But there are things that I probably did believe in the past that I'm now open to question. And partly in terms of like what is a revolution, what is a revolutionary party, and what's its relationship to the people that also are part of making a revolution. How separated are they, and how I think there's just questions. And how do you get to a place where people all are ready to take a step together? Do you get there without a party? I would still lean towards no. So I think you do need people starting to think about and talk about ideas. What does that party look like? That's a big question to me. I don't think it has anything to do with what I've been part of. Um, I think that whole thing is an experience in the negative. Tells you don't, here are the things not to do. Except I'll say today to accept to have theory, to read about history and to read about what lessons you can learn from that. You know, but because I've got this thing about science running in the back of my head, it's put some doubt through a lot of those things as well. Um, and I think the big question you asked for me that really resonated for me was, am I a revolutionary? And I think I am. Like I think that's what I want to do this for. But it made me think of Job from the. Do you know the story of Job? It's from it's from the Bible, right? And Job was like one of God's most faithful adherents. And I think in the story, so-called Satan came along, but I think Satan was another angel. It wasn't like some devil character. Basically said, Job doesn't really believe in you, because if you just started like, because Job was wealthy, he had a great family, just had all this stuff, and the doubter, the person who was questioning God, as God was kind of talking about, like, look how much he loves me, that. Um, at least this is my memory of the story. Um, he throws some doubt in it, and then he starts. Let me take away from some things from this character. Let's see if that faith sticks around. And takes his animals, takes his family, takes his riches. Life just gets worse and worse and worse. And finally, it does get to a point where actually Job got to a breaking point where he was like, "How dare you, God? What? How have you just But how can you betray me?" And it seemed at that point that Job was coming to this point of like, uh, you know, doubting, if you will. And I'm not quite there, but I feel like like things have been taken. Like I keep getting disappointed, and not seeing the things that I feel like I've read about that say that something else should be happening, but it's not. And I am in that kind of Job-like state of like looking looking at these people who I've used their ideas and their research to help me guide me in trying to make change in the world, and I'm like, I don't know about you. So I feel like I'm going through a Job like doubting. In the end, God just lectures Job and says, how dare you? Look, can you make a whale? Can you make a mountain? Shut the fuck up and get back in line. And then Job gets nice stuff later on.
Is that the Old
But
Testament? The arrogant.
that's Old Testament. Yeah. And people who know this story probably know better but that was my take on it. And I've always really been struck by that story. It always definitely been a powerful story about faith and doubt. And I think I'm going through something like that right now. Um, I don't I don't think I don't think I would. It's not a question of whether I would call myself revolutionary. I'm a person who wants revolution in conditions that have absolutely seemingly no um, life for revolution in them, around me. So it's like, if you are a reactive molecule, but you are around noble gas, helium and neon and krypton, you don't react. Nothing happens. So it's like, who cares? You're hanging out with noble gases. Nothing's going to take place. So shut the fuck up. That's kind of thing. But I don't know, that these are just ideas. I don't know what people are going to make of it, but this is what I'm thinking.
Remember when I asked you once, why do you do this? And then you told me, the fuck am I gonna do? Play video games all day?
Wait, what did I say?
Well, I asked you, like, I was trying to be like philosophical, profound, and trying to get like to why the hell do you do this? And then you asked me, what am I gonna do? Like, go play video games all day?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna be reactive and very active, regardless, and uh, yeah, it's, but it sounds like it's a lot of questions, right? And
Yeah.
the thing, but that's healthy, right? Like you've gone through those periods, similar periods. I don't know from
Yes.
the time I've known you. And again, like I'm not, I guess I'm, and I also remember this one phrase. I remember a lot of quotes you told me, or like fucking daggers that and you make me think, and I think for years about it. Yes, I do. And I remember when you told me once, and I don't know what the topic was, but you said it. Get off the fucking fence.
Mm.
And I did, but I do think what you're going through is very valuable. Like,
Mm.
like we have to, that's part of the process. You have to question, and that's for me, like, at least the difference between this system of beliefs and that. And I'm not saying it's more or less superior or completely right. It's just what I believe, and so yes, it is a system of beliefs. And I try to root it on evidence as much as possible. And like, but I'm sorry, I'm not gonna let some fucking pastor of a fucking church tell me take my shit away, to fucking like test me, right? Obviously, nor in that case myself, because I don't believe in God in that way, because I do believe in a force or whatever the fucking thing. Like, because this is that again, that is a mistake. Like my in-laws, they think I probably don't believe because I don't believe in God, but I believe in something powerful and magical and beautiful.
Mm.
And I come to understand it through this Western scientific method that is in question now. That I have to analyze, some of my analysis of what I've been told, right? And but at the same time, I know not everything is a lie because I've experienced some shit, right? Like you you don't have to fucking um, be an expert, quote unquote expert, to know that someone is going through shit, right? To understand the psychology of shit. We know what sad feels, and maybe we're not able to dissect everything the way a quote unquote professional might be able to do it. But there's still some natural intuitive shit in there, that in that it is explained in some what science attempts to explain. So there is still some usefulness to Western science. Like, to me, like, I'm not throwing everything away. I'm trying to cherry pick, like you said, what I think is useful and true and honest, and
Yeah.
in for my system of beliefs, and keep that system of beliefs as sharp as possible as I can, because I want to live a true life. And in that process, I have gone through deep, moments of depression. You know, and again, I'm just saying that in some ways I can relate. I think you're more fucked in a way because science has been such a part of your life, and way more than me. I'm not a trained scientist.
Yeah.
I think it's great, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to I think it's great because you're a very thoughtful person who processes shit, and like that's one of the things that I respect about you. like you're honest, and, and like I tell this to a lot of people, that's why I see you've been a mentor indirectly in so many ways,
Hmm.
not because of I think you're right all the time, but in that one thing that you're able to pause and question and be like, this doesn't feel right.
Hmm.
Such a cancer in that way. I know my partner is that. My partner is, you and her are very similar in that way. She will blurt out shit, be like, no, that doesn't feel right. And but I respect that, because I think that's why you live your life with a lot of integrity, and it doesn't mean you're perfect. And at times obviously you're stubborn, and like Eduardo has gotten into with you, and you know, but again, like you have to have convictions, otherwise you're not gonna believe in anything, and you have no solid ground to stand on.
Yeah.
But the admirable thing is that when these things are challenged, you question it, and like I'm excited, because after I leave this conversation, I'm gonna think about a bunch of shit. I'm not gonna stay stuck here. Like, in probably from what I said, like I don't think you have a clear picture of where I'm at. I don't know.
uh, well, I would say in this conversation, I honestly feel like you've been doing more of the guiding for me. And what I hear most of you saying is, all right, Andy, I hear you've got some doubts. Sounds like it's a good place for you to be. It sounds like it's a good place for you to explore. And for me, not to look at it as a weakness, as something that makes me vulnerable, but something that is possibly, a part of animating me towards being in a stronger position or a more sounder position or a more firmer position internally. And I feel like that's what I'm coming away from this conversation. I mean, I thought we were just not just going to talk about Marxism, and I knew we would go beyond. And even you thought we would go down towards talk about liberals and Jimmy Dore because there was an angle there. But I think this has been one where I actually feel like you have done you've in this conversation operated in a way Brian often did when I was in the ISO. Just kind of like hearing it, da, 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 and then kind of offering some guidance. So I think that's interesting to me. As your mentor, it is interesting to be mentored.
And I guess so. We said, what is the question guiding this conversation was, what is Marxism a religion? And I also think maybe this is more rhetorical. So what the hell is Marxism? You know, to everyone, because I think it has so many. Everyone has a different opinion, and that's okay. And I think like your own understanding is being changed, and again, deeping back into Marxism, Rosa Luxemburg, and many others already have talked about how like uh, you have to deal with your context, right? Your historical context, and this is what we're going through right now. And if it might mean that Marxism like evolves, or it's something else, right? That is just influenced by Marxism.
Right.
And we have to be flexible for that, right? Because if we're going to be true,
Yep.
and otherwise we're just following the religion that reads the Marxist Bible, right? As a predeterministic shit, in a different context. Because I mean, like recently on Jimmy Dore, there was this lady who talked about the virtue hoarders. I
Oh
don't know
yeah,
if
I saw that. I didn't see that episode, but I remember seeing the title.
we on our science episode, actually, we talked about the managers, the managerial class too, right? We touched on that, and so this person is talking about this in a very concise way, with some sort of like Marxist, I think, analysis. Um, and so, I mean, I don't think, I mean, the size and scope of the managerial class is something that Marx and others haven't predicted, and I don't think we know how to wrestle with it. In the dynamic is changing, where like the working class, it's not as robust. The class that will be revolutionary. And so again, our context is way different. We're questioning, science that we were told. We know we have so many lies upon us, centuries of lies at this point.
Yeah.
That it's hard to find footing in, like, but you gotta step on shit sometimes, right, to find solid footing.
And the other word you used, you said cherry picking. I do think you have to do that to deal with this society. You have to pull out. You have to pick, and that's where your own person comes in. That's where your personality, what you choose, what you try to draw out. But you can't take it all. If you took it all, you're just a chump, right? If you just take it in, CNN, da 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 da. So you have to cherry pick, and then in that cherry picking, you have to say, well, why did I pick those sets of cherries versus those sets of cherries? And that's where the me comes in, and that's where I'm questioning. And
Yeah,
but
and I think that's essential, right? Like for the world, and I believe, I don't know what word to use. uh, that's essential in making the world that I want to, because I remember I'm by no means an Marxist expert. Like I've come to it in my own way, as many others have. Uh, and so I've had people who, because they think I know a little more, or I've read some stuff, they want me to feed them quotes or feed them responses to challenges, but they have to do their own cherry picking, and like, if I put it this way, like, I picked a lot of cherries from you, but no, like, you're not the only source of cherries. I go on my own, and like, and I guess I've joined you in the journey of cherry picking in some ways, but I know I have my own journey to do. And if I'm to be honest, in bringing something to our belief system.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that's why you've been able to help me in this conversation, because you did your own work. So,
So read some books. Listen to it. Yeah.
oh, interesting. This is not necessarily. I didn't expect this to be as personal, to be honest, but it is.
But it is, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, like, everything we do, it's like, I mean, especially you, like, you don't do this for as a hobby.
yeah.
Like, yeah, it is
But
personal.
I honestly, I'm gonna look forward to editing this episode to re-listen to what you said, because sometimes I was trying to think, what am I trying to say? So I don't. I'm gonna get to listen to round two, um, and I'm glad we had this discussion.
Yeah,
And I'm just struck, honestly, Kenny. I'm just struck by. I feel like in this case, what, I'm 57. You're 36.
yeah,
36. But I feel like I was talking to a 70-year-old man. Like it just. I was like listening, like, you know, uh, oh, this. I felt like I was hearing wisdom, kind of thing. So I
and
appreciate that.
transgenerational, right?
Yeah, right.
And
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I like it.
I mean, and again, but that's right. Like, I don't know everything. My daughter is gonna teach me so many things,
Yeah, yeah,
like, in her own ways, and like, again, and she will have something to say about that world too, and like, have
yeah,
her own ideas,
yeah.
and so we're all in it together. And like, sometimes my shit doesn't land, and
Right.
you still have to say it, and like, this is where I'm at right now. Just like, this is where you're at right now, and we're gonna continue evolving because we have to. And like, yeah,
Yep. Well, thank you. As I've said before, I love you, and I really appreciate today and having this episode with just you and me. So, um, sign out.
yeah, I think perfect.
All right, Kenny. Thanks again. And I think we might be talking about open borders next week. We'll see. I might leave that out. That does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast channel challenging the mainstream left and apparently challenging me. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes wherever you found this episode or on our blog, what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find past episodes of this podcast channel there and connect with us. I remind people, if you like anything you've heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on notifications to any of our, I think it's 8 platforms, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Bitchute, Odysee, YouTube, Rumble, Telegram. Yeah, 8. Okay. If you'd like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. And that's it. I believe Eduardo will be back next week, and we'll see if, I think it's going to be me, you, and Eduardo next week, but we'll see. And I look forward to seeing you all or coming back next week for our next What's Left. Take care.